Live from London, this is BBC News. Donald Trump will appear in a Miami courtroom in the next few hours. He faces federal criminal charges for allegedly mishandling classified documents. Trump supporters are already gathering near the courthouse. We'll be there live. In the UK, a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 3 people were found dead in Nottingham city centre. 11 people have been killed in Ukraine by Russian missile strikes on the hometown of President Zelensky. And public hearings of the inquiry into the UK government's handling of the COVID pandemic have got underway with emotional testimony from bereaved families.
We're going to know people that die from this, but I never thought for a minute of being my dad and my sister 5 days apart.
Hello, I'm Matthew Emery-Waller and welcome to Verified Live. 3 hours of breaking stories and checking out the truth behind them. Well, let's start in the US because Donald Trump appears in a court in Miami a little later today, the first former US president to face a federal criminal prosecution. He's accused of hoarding thousands of classified government documents after leaving office and lying to officials who try to get them back. Mr. Trump denies the charges against him and says they are politically motivated. Let me just show you the live pictures from around the court buildings because you can see, of course, all the television trucks and security, but already some of Donald Trump's supporters gathering there and relatively high levels of security, given some of the things that have been posted in the last few days on social media. But the scene very much set for the hours ahead. And watching proceedings is our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue, so let's bring him in. And Gary, in terms of legal jeopardy, just how grave is the situation for Donald Trump?
These are serious charges, there's no question. 31 of them, of 37 he's facing, are under what's called the Espionage Act, and that sounds pretty serious, doesn't it? And it is. And this is about withholding documents of national security. Interestingly not, it doesn't really matter whether they're classified or not. So all this debate over whether Donald Trump had the right to classify or declassify, etc., you know, holding these documents and misusing them and willfully not giving them back is what he's charged with. Also, of course, obstruction of justice, which is pretty serious in any legal system. So those are the things that will be read out to him later in court today when he appears here behind me. He'll be fingerprinted, booked in the normal way, just as he was back in New York a couple of months ago. You say there's some of his supporters outside, not very many to be honest. There was a little flurry a moment ago, Matthew, where some people were cleared out of a space. There appeared to be the bomb squad there. They arrested a guy, or they seemed to take away a guy who was delivering a flat screen TV. So we'll find out later perhaps what was behind all that, but a little moment of tension there.
Gary, just take us through what you're expecting when Donald Trump arrives at the court in terms of cameras inside of the courtroom, outside of the courtroom, the charges, are they read out one by one? What are the mechanics of what we're likely to see?
So we think at about, maybe in about sort of 3.5, 4 hours time from now, he'll leave his Doral golf course, which is in one of the Miami suburbs. It's about a 25-minute drive from there to the courthouse here in Miami. He'll probably, we think, go into an underground garage sort of car park area. He'll then be taken into the court, and at some point there he'll be booked, so the fingerprints and the details that's actually logging him in. He'll then be taken to the top floor of the building where a magistrate in fact, will preside over the proceedings. The charges will be read out to him. He'll be asked to enter a plea, and we expect him, of course, to say not guilty in this case. And then they'll decide, you know, his conditions of being released. We don't expect there to be any bail or any kind of prohibition on him leaving custody, etc., etc. So he'll be released in that sense. And then he'll go straight back to the airport and fly back to New Jersey, where he's expected to make a statement later tonight. So in some ways it'll be very, very similar to what happened last time in New York, that sort of procedure. in and out, and then the sort of the big speech afterwards. And while the police here are saying they're ready for up to 50,000 protesters, they have the capacity for that, there's no sign of anything like that on that scale at this point in time. But we are still, a few hours off.
Gary, it was interesting because prosecutors mulled over whether to bring this court case in Washington or Miami. They went for Miami. So tell us a little more about that, the judge, the jury, how all of that is likely to play itself out.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of sort of unknowns at this stage. I mean, we do expect after these the arraignments that Donald Trump's lawyers will, for example, try and file a motion to dismiss the trial. That can delay things for a little while. There's some controversy over the judge. In fact, this case is likely to be heard in West Palm Beach, just up the coast of here, 70 miles from here. The reason they're having this hearing here today, I think, is because of the logistics and the concerns about whether or not, the police department in Palm Beach could cope with something like this. But, the actual case is based in Palm Beach because, of course, that's where Mar-a-Lago is. That's where these documents were held and kept, according to the prosecution, and withheld from the FBI, and including after a subpoena. So that's what will happen there. There's a judge who's been assigned to that, who has been accused of sort of pro-Trump bias in the past. She's a Trump appointee. One of her decisions in this case previously was overturned pretty scathingly by the Court of Appeal that sits above her in the federal structure. So that will be a point of contention. But the special prosecutor, special counsel, Jack Smith, who's been organising this whole thing, says he expects there to be a speedy trial. And there is some evidence that actually things do move reasonably quickly in Florida. So we don't have a time scale at this point in time. We may hear that. We know that his other trial in New York is sort of, at the moment, sort of penciled in for around March next year. Of course, right in the middle of the Republican primary. And if Jack Smith has his way, this one's going to happen, maybe as quickly as that. So Donald Trump's going to not only have to crisscross the country doing primaries and caucuses, but may have to do a few court appearances at the same time. Absolutely extraordinary position for the front leader in the Republican race for the nomination.
Yes, and of course there are two other possible indictments in the sidelines as well. Gary, for now, thanks once again. Let's talk to the Democratic strategist Marianne Marsh, who joins us on the programme. Marianne, thanks very much for being here. Your take on today's indictment and the seriousness of it?
Well, the fact is, this is a national security matter. And in the case of the United States of America versus Donald Trump, and the 37 counts charged under the Espionage Act represent the most serious crimes any American can face. And the evidence that is so incriminating in this indictment is only the tip of the iceberg. Amongst the materials Donald Trump has, or at the time had, that he lied about and hid repeatedly to the federal government and other entities, as well as his own lawyers, were military plans to attack Iran by the United States, military assets that countries around the world have, military vulnerability, nuclear assets that countries around the world have, military vulnerabilities that countries around the world have, as well as the United States. So Donald Trump couldn't be in a tougher situation, and his fate is based on his ability to win in the court of law, which is where he is today, and the court of public opinion. In the court of law, this indictment uses his own words and the words of others with him to show that he knew exactly what he was doing.
You'll have seen how he's responded and his supporters have responded. I mean, the Republican governor of New Hampshire said only recently the Democrats are like the boy who cried wolf. Oh, no, but this one is real. We had a Republican on the programme only an hour or so ago who was saying that Joe Biden had documents when he was vice president. It is the same. That was his contention. Why is it different?
Well, Joe Biden and others cooperated and informed the federal government and the FBI and others they had the documents. Donald Trump, on the other hand, lied about it to everybody and then continued to play hide and seek every time the FBI lawyers and others went searching for those documents. So it's clear he's hiding them. Why? We have to ask ourselves what he was doing with them. They're not his documents to hold. It's not like a souvenir from a summer vacation. They belong to the federal government and should have been returned before he walked out of the White House. And the other is, who did he show them to? And did he perhaps even sell them? So what is he doing with these documents? And I will just underscore the fact, this indictment, as incriminating as it is literally just the tip of the iceberg. The prosecutor did not show all the evidence, did not show all the documents, and did not show everything they're going to argue in court. And that should be very chilling and worrisome for Donald Trump.
And yet, for his base, it seems to have absolutely no impact at all, possibly even enhance his possible getting that Republican nomination. I mean, from the outside, in terms of the rule of law, politics in the US, it looks pretty broken.
Well, it's not, though. We've been here before, 1973, with Richard Nixon and Watergate and his vice president Spiro Agnew under 41 federal indictments. So we've been here. The reality is it's only a portion of the Republicans. Sadly, 76% of Republicans in a CBS poll that was released in the last 72 hours think this is all politics. However, 80% of Democrats, independents, and some Republicans, 80% of Americans believe that this is a serious matter and he should have been charged. So while Donald Trump will be the nominee for the Republicans, no question, he will lose the general election because the majority of the people believe he should have been charged and is acting recklessly. Last point here, you don't walk into any court, let alone a federal court, with this indictment on politics. It comes with facts, evidence, and laws that you have to meet and prove your case. That is what happened here. And it's sad propaganda by Republicans and others, Trump supporters, to try to brainwash so many people when facts seem to be fungible in a court of law. And in this case, the facts are damning.
Just a final quick thought, because you'll have seen some of the rhetoric that's been on social media from some of his supporters, even referencing the amount of people with guns in the United States if the authorities want to come for Donald Trump. That's what Carrie Lake had referenced in one of her tweets. So what do you make of that? How concerned are you by language like that?
It's a dangerous game, and people, unfortunately, just like January 6th, were harmed, and many of them paid the price. Thousands of them, as a matter of fact, have been charged and sent to jail. Donald Trump has not yet. And Donald Trump has to win in the court of law and the court of public opinion to survive. And he knows that. And so what I would say to everyone is this is a great country. It is a country of laws. Nobody is above the law. And that is proven today by the fact that Donald Trump is in court.
Marianne Marsh, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us here on BBC News.
My pleasure.
Straight to breaking news, that story of the last few hours from the English city of Nottingham, just the latest from the university there in the city, who have said that 2 of the 3 people killed in Tuesday's attacks were students at the university. So just some detail there coming from the university. 2 of the 3 people killed in those attacks in the early hours of the morning were students in the university. Well, it has been an extraordinary few hours in that city. Joe Inward has the latest on that major story.
Ilkeston Road early this morning. Police arrived to find 2 people dead. A local man told the BBC he'd heard cries for help and a blood-curdling scream before seeing a man and a woman stabbed multiple times. It was the beginning of a sequence of events that led to the lockdown of Nottingham city centre. Officers were soon in Milton Street, right in the heart of the city, where it's claimed that a van tried to run over pedestrians. Lynn saw it happen.
2 people turning the corner. He went straight in to these 2 people. The woman went on the curb. The man went up in the air. It was such a bang. I wish I never saw it, because it's really shaken me up.
Police later said that a 3rd person had also been hit. All 3 are said to be in hospital.
The woman was sitting up on the curb. She looked okay. The man was laying down, but then he got up. Sat him on the side, waiting for an ambulance. But I just can't believe he was able to get up after the head wound.
There was also a body discovered in Magdala Street, just to the north of the city centre. Police are yet to comment on possible motives, but the Chief Constable did say, "This is a horrific and tragic incident which has claimed the lives of 3 people. We believe these 3 incidents are all linked, and we have a man in custody. This investigation is at its early stages, and a team of detectives is working to establish exactly what has happened." In a tweet, the Prime Minister said, "I want to thank the police and emergency services for their ongoing response to the shocking incident in Nottingham this morning. I'm being kept updated on developments. The police must be given the time to undertake their work. My thoughts are with those injured and the family and loved ones of those who have lost their lives." Sentiments echoed by the Leader of the Opposition.
I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room in saying that we'd like to just send our thoughts to all those affected and to the emergency services who are responding to this as we speak.
This is where at 5:30 in the morning, police arrested a 31-year-old man on suspicion of murder. He is now being held in custody. There is still a heavy police presence in Nottingham this lunchtime as the city begins the search for answers. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Well, around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
The world is full of opportunities. Together, we can make the most of them. How we invest today is how we live tomorrow.
Now is the time for a new impulse. Moving from a stable ground to a tipping point. Now is the time to be ahead. Now is the time for agility, for sustainable acts. Now is your time.
You're live with BBC News. Now, a public inquiry has opened in London into the UK's handling of the COVID pandemic. The hearings are expected to last for 3 years. In her opening statement, the inquiry's chairwoman, the retired Judge Baroness Hallett, said those bereaved by the virus would be right at the heart of the investigation. Well, let's talk now to Susie Crozier from the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group. Susie, thank you for being here with us on BBC News. I know you lost your father in the pandemic. You've waited a very long time for today. Your thoughts then on a day like today?
I mean, I think it's a culmination of a lot of very, very hard work by the campaign for 3 years. We've been fighting for this inquiry for a very long time. It's a bit of a mixed bag, though. We've got Baroness Hallett very robustly going after the Cabinet Office to get those WhatsApp messages, to get those notebooks and diaries on one hand, pursuing that really vigorously, which I'm really pleased to see. But on the other hand, excluding the bereaved from proceedings themselves, and actually we're the ones who know what happened, we're the ones whose evidence is vital to learning lessons, and yet we've been shunted off to the side, we've been marginalised, and we're not allowed to give testimony to the inquiry ourselves. And our stories are so important because it's from our stories that lessons can be learned going forward. So if we get another pandemic, we're not in the same position that we were this time.
Do you not think that that has been accepted by the inquiry? I mean, the inquiry started after the chairwoman's statement with that incredibly powerful 17-minute video with so many voices of people who'd lost loved ones, and the chair making the point that that will be right at the heart of what they're trying to find answers about.
You can't question a video. You can't unpick the stories from a video. You need people in the room to do that, to get to the minutiae, to get to the detail. And it seems to me more tokenistic than anything else. Like, you know, that module 1 is on preparedness. And for example, I personally am well placed to talk about that because of the experience that my dad had going from an environment where he was safe into one where he he wasn't, where the care home were able to lock down, where they could source PPE, where they had protocols in place, and then out into a country that wasn't yet in lockdown, into a hospital where he caught COVID, and where the first time I saw PPE was when he was already dying. So actually, people like me are well placed to give our testimony, to answer questions, to unpick and unravel everything that went on. You can't do that just by watching a video, and you can't do that if you anonymise and homogenise the bereaved experiences.
And of course, there are so many answers that different people are searching for. I know in your case, all those events around the funeral were so distressing. In terms of the sort of answers that you want to hear over this extended, I mean, it's going to last till 2026. What are the key things that you want to find answers to?
So I want to know why the Cygnus report of 2016 was ignored, because that seemed to lay out a roadmap if we ever had a pandemic. I want to know why decision-making was so late and was pretty much ineffective. I want to know why Atletico Madrid game and the Cheltenham Festival were allowed to go ahead. I want to know why the economy was prioritised over people, because I don't understand how you can separate those two things. If you've got an ill or dying or disabled population, the economy is affected. Surely you prioritise public health first and the economy takes care of itself. I want to know why our loved ones were sacrificed to this virus completely needlessly when there were things in place that we could have done, and there was really sound advice coming out of our epidemiologists and virologists that was ignored by our government. And I want to know, I want assurances that it will never, ever happen again.
Susie Crozier, Flintham, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us on what must be a difficult day, but thank you for sparing us your time.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to Ukraine, because we've seen another night of Russian missile strikes, which has left 11 people dead in the southern Ukrainian city, which is the hometown of President Zelensky. Well, let's go live to Kyiv. My colleague Yada Hakim is there and has been for the last few days, just seeing the change there has been since the start of this counter-offensive. Yada, over to you.
Systems were hard at work here overnight as those Russian missiles attempted to attack various cities across the country. Well, I've got with me here a member of Parliament, Kira Rudik, who can give us a little bit more of a sense of what's been going on here in Kyiv and in other parts of the country. Really great to see you in person. We've spoken so many times while I've been in London. It is easy to have a false sense of security in Kyiv, but we saw last night those attacks and, of course, what happened in central Ukraine with 11 people dead.
Hello, Yalda. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to see you in person. Indeed, right now we are taking the air raid sirens that are on almost every night. We take them very seriously because Russia is still able to produce more missiles. They do not count them and they are launching them almost every night. And you see what happened in Kryvyi Rih, where people were killed, civilian people who basically were in their beds. And this is, of course, absolutely terrifying. We are urging the world to put more sanctions in to make sure that Russia does not have the particles to manufacture more and more missiles. As of right now, they are still able to do that with the help of Iran and with the potential helps from the other countries. So this would be the step one to make sure that they can not manufacture missiles anymore. The second point is, of course, getting more air defense systems. You see how effective and efficient are our defense military with them, making sure that when we go to bed every night, we are able and we have hopes that we would wake up.
Yeah, I mean, this counteroffensive has begun. Little bits of information and detail is now emerging as a result.
Well, you know, as our Minister of Defense says, the plans love the silence, and this is why we are being very careful discussing counteroffensive. And there is a huge difference between how you look at it from outside the country and inside the country. When you're talking outside, it's more of like, we gave you all those weapons, so when are you going to march forward? When you are inside Ukraine, by this time, almost every Ukrainian family has somebody fighting at the front. So when we are talking counteroffensive, we are talking somebody whom we love dearly, who will have to get out of the trenches and march forward. And this is why our request to our military commanders is please, 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 please make sure that we have minimal losses. Because we are losing
a huge ask, given how brutal and bloody this conflict is becoming and will become.
It is indeed. But you know, when it's not just some people, it's people that you know, it's people that you love. And we right now at the battlefield, we have the bravest, the smartest, the most confident people who went out to defend our country. And this is why we know that we cannot use the same strategy as Russia does, to use people as a battlefield meat.
I mean, I've only got about a minute left, but what I want to ask is, we're hearing about these small villages, but these gains so far have been small. There hasn't been a major push through yet.
Not yet. But if you look back a year ago, the liberating of Kherson did not happen overnight as well. There were preparations before that, and freeing of Kharkiv region as well. So right now we have our fingers crossed. We are doing everything from our side that we can to support our army, and we are absolutely sure that our military commanders will do their job, as they have already proven themselves.
Kira, thank you so much for joining us. Good to talk to you.
Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. That was Kira Rudik, a member of parliament there, giving us a sense of what's going on in other parts of this country. And even though you get a false sense of security being here in Kiev, those air raid sirens, they keep you up and remind you that this is a nation that's still at war. But Matthew, we know that James Waterhouse has a piece coming up in the next few minutes. He's been to one of those liberated areas in the southeast of the country, the first journalist to get to that area. He's got a piece, so we look forward to seeing that and seeing what James has found. But for now, back to you in the studio, Matthew.
Yavda, thanks very much. Just let me return to President Putin. A reminder, he's been talking in the last little while, saying there is no need for additional mobilisation now. He's also been talking about the lack of high-precision ammunition and drones, but says that their industries are working day and night to try to fix that. So plenty more on Ukraine and the rest of our headlines in just a moment.